True,
There are
true.
3 events on Tuesday night at 7 p.m. and
People can double dip.
that's
Yeah.
true. I think they may just zip into one or the other, especially during National Poetry Month. April.
Zoom is the place to be.
Yes.
Hi, David.
Hey,
Very
April.
nice to.
Good to see you.
Shay, do you want to wait a couple of more minutes, or what do you think?
I think let's give it, you know, people are still coming in.
Okay.
In our rural area, we have unstable connections.
Oh. In our rural area, we have unstable neighbors, but we're doing our best.
Hi, Cliff. Thank you.
This is an amazing turnout. Incredible.
It's really terrific.
I see we have some veterans from our Olive Free Library reading. Hi.
And we have another Mexican visitor, Mario Villalobos, coming from Mexico City.
Bienvenidos. Mucho gusto.
Mario.
Thank you very much. I turned off my microphone.
Okay.
Because I'm not going to read
mi vida.
I see somebody called Hudson Valley Writers. We're in the Hudson Valley. Where are you?
I'm in New York.
Hi, Rebecca.
I'm in New York.
I'm in Woodstock, so there.
Hi. Hudson Valley Writers Center is actually in the living room of where I am in the kitchen.
Hi,
Oh, I love that. Love that.
Not Hudson Valley at all, but hey, what's the words?
Jan Lori, you want me to go ahead and get started?
You start whenever you feel ready.
Great. Okay. Well, first, I just want to welcome everyone. My name is Shay, and I'm a clerk at the Olive Free Library, and it is my great pleasure to be with you this afternoon. Just a bit of Zoom etiquette. I'd ask anyone who's not speaking to mute themselves, and that'll just make the audio quality clearer because we are going to record this event. And just to say a little bit, the Olive Free Library, for those who don't know, is a community center for the town of Olive, and has been serving as its residents for many years, and during this particular time is learning how to serve its residents during what is a very strange situation. And I think that this is a really great example of that. And while it's so unfortunate that we couldn't gather together, I'm also appreciating how many more people can actually be here for the event today because they're not limited by geography. So I just wanna, again, thank you so much for giving some of your beautiful spring day to be here with us. Artists and poets especially remind us of our humanity and what is most fundamental during times of great uncertainty. And so this is delicious medicine for the moment that we're in. And so without further ado, I'd like to turn things over to Sue Ann and Jan Lori. Thank you.
Hi. Okay, thank you very much, Shay. And again, I want to also welcome everyone to this third annual and now virtual poetry reading of the Olive Free Library. I want to thank the library for its continued support of this event and for most especially hosting this Zoom meeting today. Thank you, Chrissy, Amy, and Shay. But I also want to thank my co-organizer, Jan Lori Goldman, who has been the real engine behind today's reading. Over to you, Jan Lori.
Wow, an engine, chugga chugga, here we go. Hi, as Sue Ann said, I'm Jan Lori Goldman, co-host of this reading. I want to give a full-throated shout out to the Olive Free Library, to Chrissy Lawler and Shay Satimi and Sue Ann Sprague for making this annual poetry gathering possible and for their enthusiasm to move this reading online. How exciting that we can be in community together with folks from all over the country and the world. In this time of physical distancing, when we are told our survival hinges on us remaining apart, we poets and poetry lovers and lovers of poets know the truth. Our survival depends on us staying deeply connected. We know from Muriel Rukeyser and Audre Lorde and Gregory Orr that our deepest urges for survival and flourishing and healing and intimacy are met by poetry, language at its most essential and most surprising. We write to understand ourselves. We read to understand ourselves. We share poetry to deepen our connections to each other and to our world. We find courage and comfort in the poems of the poets who have lived through other rough times, world wars, the Holocaust, struggles for civil rights and justice, genocide through 9/11, and now this pandemic, with all of its collateral harms of isolation and suffering. We need each other now, and for when we come through to the other side. As Gwendolyn Brooks wrote in an homage to Paul Robeson, we are each other's harvest. We are each other's magnitude and bond. I'm so thrilled to introduce you to three of my most favorite poets and people. I'll introduce them one at a time in the order in which they're gonna read. We're gonna lead off with David Groff. He's the author of Clay, chosen by Michael Waters for the Louise Bogan Award, and Theory of Devolution, selected by Mark Doty for the National Poetry Series. David is an independent book editor and publishing consultant, and I will tell you he is brilliant and perfect in both of those roles as someone who has benefited, and he teaches in the MFA Creative Writing Program at the City College of New York. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Jen Laurie. Thank you, thank you. My thanks to you and to the Olive Public Library people and all who've come today, family and friends. It's great to be here and to have so many of us in one place. And I'm wondering how many people have shoes on versus slippers. I'm wearing slippers, so I'm curious about that. I'm going to start with my newest poem, which is also my most annoyed poem. So you'll have a sense, you know, if this is as bad as it gets in terms of my annoyance, I think. It's a current poem. It's called Mayday, which is coming up, and you'll see why. Mayday. Once that was Communist Party headquarters with its rusted green cornice and labor of stone seen from this rented apartment's window just beyond the red brick rowdy synagogue at a scrap of Chelsea Gardens complex where George Hodgman killed himself somehow last summer when life was easier for some people, trapped as they were not in the bramble of their building, every person for themselves or not, and nervous, the roommate, the last nerve, lovers, comrades, the alone, all lonely, everywhere a sexual distancing, injustice playing itself out down on the ground where the fit young bankers run the streets as they break from their foreclosing, and the manic homeless find no hand and not even empty cans to redeem. The avenues bare but for crumpled gloves, anger blowing in whirlpools of litter, litter everywhere, the litter of humans, their governing gods gone into lockdown in their seventh, second homes, secure, secured, those presiding daddies ripe with pride that they are killing mostly the minor masses while their day blooms silent and beautiful, even the promise of fruit suspicious. This next poem maybe has some of the feel of that poem. It's not a quarantine poem. And this poem and the one after it, the title runs right into the first line. I leave Clay, but just for a weekend. Business, Los Angeles, so what's the risk? Still, each parting is practice. It's a little death, what Dunn and the others called orgasm, that intense attention, a squeezing out of semen the metaphysical said we didn't remake, not a river, but a draining lake. I embrace this shrug of separation, the unbrushed goodbye at 6 a.m., the plunge in the stomach as the elevator plunges downward, as the plane will not plunge, probably, nor will the lift crash on La Cienega or the boulevard fall into fissures, nor will Clay's bike collide with a truck on Route 9 that sends him plunging down a palisade. Every risk is a rehearsal. We know what chance does. We know what death does, will do, has to do. Which is why when I kiss clay, I recall how HIV, unchecked, made our everyday a next to last, urgent as orgasm, until it was tamed to both truth and metaphor. Which is why when I kiss clay, I taste the dust of his tongue. Re-erected with desire, we are metaphysical, the little death, a spasm away. Leaving him, I return to him. You're in my light, said my father to his boy when I leaned under his lamp, crawling against his wingback in my short joy. I never got that he meant I darkened his text, could never connect my shadow, his head bent. I thought I cast no shade, that my body was just myself, apprentice to his mass. But I had the shape to have made myself a power of dark. I thought I could see to read in any light God shed, sunlight or spark. Now he is dead, past text, no light at all on his lap. You're in my light and I can't see what's next, he says. I say back, you're in my light. And so we share our shade, both of us, light and its lack. My mother, still she is an other. My fears make her remote as a last ridge rife with veins and caves, the conceits of veins and caves, slippery, scary to climb, her summit crowned in cloud. Witnessed from death's distance, her lovely skirt swaying, she carries with her her frame, but I lose her in my mystery. Still, she blooms somewhat, as if stepping forward from her body into the character I love with all my failings. I try not to falter further, not to deny in her her half-fathomed humanness and make of her another reflection, mother, producer, a kind of partner. I, a male full of males, of female born. Mother, you of unswum pools, your grotto so deep I shy in the shallows, I reach across to offer you my myopic eye. I lose my footing, I breaststroke to you, you a woman full of yourself, swimming to an inseparation until with your lost body, you might give me birth again. Clay and I live in a rental apartment building in New York City. Some of you have visited here. And one of the joys of living in a rental building is other people. And this poem, which is also written before quarantine, I think echoes it today, because it's about the fact that it seems a requirement for a lease in our building that you be a regular marijuana smoker. So this poem is about that, and it's called 4:20 a.m. Into our window creeps a burning skunk from a story below. I don't awake to debunk the marijuana minute of drifting up and out, or the solitary body faith that comes about when THC dopamines the dawn and nausea vaporizes into appetite. Let us pause a minute to appreciate the need a few have for the specific one or two burnt offerings cannabis provides, hunger amid cancer, and more easily the slide into a state of being contained in ourself to thrive as one person, sated for a bit. I recall this from 1995. And sometimes sober, I think we stand for the smell in our hair and on our hands, for the fat solitude of things, not only because we get to put our common lives on pause, but because it lets us screw you, the man who in his dad or cop or boss uniform demands we play well with others. The man whose brute demand smothers original impulse or the need to play alone. So Downstairs in the dark, a guy gets stoned as Monday dawns around him on demand. While a flight above, we stir and stand, aching into the day, two middle-aged lovers, stale-breathed in stupor with each other, no longer spinning out our single druthers, each waking up unfree of the other. The men we are, our skunk, the sweat we make asleep, our spunk. Grieved and aggrieved with contact highs, we kiss good morning and we rise. Two more poems, slightly longer ones. Last September, I got to go to Maine and write, and that was a wonderful thing. We were smack in the center of Maine, and there was a lake. I've never been a lake guy, but for this time, I made an exception. It was wonderful to be out there, and when I try to calm myself these days, I walk around that lake in my head, even though I can't walk much more than beyond to the Hudson River. So this poem is called Disbelieving These Deaths. I Go to Sit by Lake Hebron. A thunderstorm has spun from a near blue sky, then faded like a tantrum, the child sunny and unharmed. Warmth like a human's breath shrugs off the fall wind. The lake is only mildly disturbed. It didn't know the deceased, so its sympathies don't extend to empathy, and it is a lake, not a pathetic fallacy, though I try. I work to stay here, not to be netted to various keenings, hard to do even on a good day. In the shallows are the slabs of slate, like coffins fallen off a truck, each one not containing a body I knew, although slate caskets irretrievable in water speaks to me. They inform me that if I were really here, I would notice the cloud very like a whale until it blossoms like a puppy, fast. A chorus of dead from a chorus of caskets ought to open their lids and shoulder out of their slabs to walk on water. My dead father would eye the lake for plops of fish he could catch and feel guilty for eating, eye to eye, though he was dubious of lakes, preferring currents, local waters strung to seas, which lets me see him as a river, bodies of water as bodies, as metaphors, including the Babylon waters of weeping. My mother, city-born, should stride to me across the tidelessness, the wind revealing her girlish nape. And George, my most recent dead guy, cleared of the thunder behind his brow, and now rising right here, part of the democracy of day. Along with Daniel Chrisman, 25, dead on 9/11, 18 years ago today, a man I know from a poster gladly diving at 43 into this crisp water, warmer than dying young. All my loves with AIDS, the guys who I drag everywhere, Ron, Len, Craig, Jay, Paul, Mark, John, Tom, Richard, the armada ghosting the cove, their wakes cut short, should land on the island I am. Hebron, the first city, arid, blazes from across the ocean, its millennia of murders, histories bleeding into each other, torches and missiles and rifles like lake lightning. Children killed in cars or cages, they should splash. All of these once knew the word for lake, said lake, swam in a lake of genuine water, fell through the frosty metaphor of lake, their lips too blue and sown, ever to say lake again. Here they are, none of them at all, evaporated out of time until I become a lake nobody swims in. Again, the trees tremble, the clouds lower their cliche of brow, the water snaps like a shroud. It is a day in September, more thunder to come. The lake is alive with togue, perch, and bass. I thank you again, all of you, for coming, and for Jen Laurie, and to Sarah and Sean, and to the Olive Public Library folk. This is my last poem, and I need you to reimagine streets populated for this poem, urban streets, because this takes place in a landscape that is filled with people. It's called I with No Rights in This Matter. All day I have been looking for my children, who I know will never exist. I do not find them in the forms of my students, though I would pluck them out of traffic as if my genes were speaking. Nor are my children my nieces and nephews whose blood bears resemblances to my own, in whom I echo. They have parents to belong to, and I borrow them. Tangled amid the toddlers and strollers, the elementary kids skipping beside their dads to school, the 10-year-olds walking boldly alone past the chanting man and the compost bin, the sullen or screeching teens, all angry angles, their parents, practiced men and women who once as babies might have sat on my lap and now run enterprises. I am where among them? My non-procreation seemed the condition of my freedom. I, who swept from man to man, who lived like a boy, who felt like no one's father, not even his own, who in the prime of his sperm suspected his semen was deadly, who saw men of a generation give birth to death, his ejaculations, dead ends, ciphers of surges and love, who can't run fast enough to catch the fading train. Still, I feel in the fork of my genes the churning germ I produce even now, those millions, however warped and bent, clamoring to make half the child I will not make, striving inside me as I try to bear the mostly straight world's stranger children, offspring owned by no one, really, amazing in their incipient decay, stray as leaves and already scattering, running to the risk of the intersection, all of them my letters to God on the street. I let them go ahead of me. Thank you.
Oh, David, thank you. So beautiful. Unmute everyone and give David a big woo!
Thank you.
Oh my God.
Good job, David.
We can snap all we want, but you can't hear us if we don't unmute, right?
Thank you.
David, that was so beautiful.
Beautiful, really beautiful.
I think about every risk is a rehearsal. That's just going to stay with me for a long time. Thank you for that. And for urging us to reimagine a cluttered, crowded landscape of New York. That also, I can hardly say it without feeling choked up. Thank you, David. Next, we turn to Sarah Van Arsdale. Wildly multi-talented Sarah Van Arsdale. She knows how envious I am of her talents. She's the author of 4 books of fiction and a single book-length poem titled The Catamount, which is illustrated with her own watercolors. Her poem, What the Heart Wants, was translated into Spanish and chosen for a project titled Los Siete Pecados Capitales, The 7 Deadly Sins. Sarah teaches in the Antioch, LA Low Residency MFA program and at NYU. She curates the Bloom Reading Series in Upper Manhattan, which a number of us have had the privilege of reading at, and I'm eager to hear you, Sarah. Take it away.
Thank you, Jen Laurie. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jen Laurie and the Olive Free Library for making this happen. And thanks to everybody who came. I'm really kind of overwhelmed by how many people have shown up for this, including from the land of Mexico and the land of California. And it's great to see everybody without your muzzle on. So this first poem you'll see is what was written a couple of years ago. It's called Dinner Party 2018. It's a lovely hush, leaving the anxious underhum when we step from the dinner party to the street, exhausted by the chatter and the sweets, the endless who, what, where of our lucky, lucky lives. It's a hive, this city, and the bees make such a noise. Feel a little bit like I channeled Dorothy Parker in that one. This next one, before January, I was writing poems kind of about how we live today, because I was a little bit confounded by some of the habits that we all have. This is called In the Early Years of the 21st Century. We lived with animals in our homes, but we didn't say it like that. We said we had pets, usually dogs or cats. They were so familiar to us that it didn't seem odd to have animals lying around on our sofas. There were other animals that were outside, usually deer and squirrels. There was a clear delineation between those animals and the ones we lived with. The dogs needed to go outside, and we put jackets on them and harnesses and collars and walked just behind them. Late in the first quarter of the 21st century, we learned that dogs had evolved a tiny muscle just above the eye, making them seem inquisitive or needful, a little forlorn. A tiny muscle with a lot of emotional information. The dogs without that expression dropped out of the gene pool. Some of us bought dogs from breeders. We grew bored with the usual breeds, Dalmatian, Dachshund, and crossed breeds to make Cormatians or Labskis or Golden Doodles. Some of us got the dogs from what we called a pound, which housed the dogs their humans didn't want. Those must have had less evolved muscles above their eyes. They must have looked at us and not been able to turn on the adorable canine charm. Cats would have nothing to do with that. This next one I wrote about a year ago, and it plays off of Elizabeth Bishop's One Art, which I realize is kind of a risky and bold thing to do, but here it is, After One Art. The adjustment wasn't really hard to master. We ranted, found many ways to vent, convinced ourselves it wasn't true disaster. Summer lingered, the goldenrod and asters in late September, still not fully spent. An early spring, long summer isn't hard to master. We checked our phones as the problems all grew vaster, and no one checked our imbecilic president. We still weren't convinced we faced a true disaster. The lousy news kept coming fast and faster as Sisyphus continued his ascent, and we kept thinking this was something we could master. Floods in Texas, hurricanes in Maine, the last or next to last rainforest in Brazil went. And still, was this the last disaster? The birds were going in their final swift descent. Goodbye tigers, honeybees, and bats. It was evident this adjustment wasn't hard to master, though now it looks like, write it like disaster. This poem I did write a few years ago. It's called Virus, so I figured it was a good one to read, even though it's clearly of a very different virus. And I'm very happy to say I do not have this current virus, and I'm grateful for that every day. Virus. My throat's O closes to a nautilus of saline stricture, coiled spring, a whirl of pinpricks, burning spiral string. In its protein capsule, the virus climbs my cellular netting, determined and unafraid, searching for a latch hold, impelled to survive long enough to pass to another ungracious host and be done with me at last. Early morning leads into noon. I sleep and wake again into my room. A rivery shadow shimmers on the wall. It must be dusk. It's early spring. Here's my silver tabby with her chirp. I think I understand, nestling on my chest to watch and wait. Does she suspect, like me, the world's just made of longing, love, and light? Even mud and water, blood and lymph, reduced to their essential elements. Even virus, even me. This next poem, as David had one also like this, the title leads into the poem. This is a title that I've been thinking of a lot recently in the past few months. And I've also been thinking of the woman who became a character in the poem, because I think she would have a lot of wisdom to give me and all of us if she were still around. You can get used to anything. She said that toward the end. She'd loved an evening drink, a good chunk of seedy bread spread with tapenade. Then the cancer came. Still, having lost her Leonard, her evening drink, her appetite, knowing she would miss her children's lives complete, still, in spite of this, she laughed with me. We were on the terrace of a country house, the summer air bright with birds and bees, raising our glasses to dear, dead Leonard. That final summer, she came to visit one last time and danced on the dirt road alone with her headphones on. I couldn't hear a thing. And this poem is something that I wish for all of us. It's called Recovery, but again, I wrote it a long time ago. Funny how poetry seems to still pertain. Recovery. One morning you will wake, sunlight pooling across clean polka-dotted sheets, and palm the scar that's healing to a seam. Your body's an impeccable machine, rush of platelets, salt and iron, new cells imbricating newer cells, the tides of your own blood leading you forward into your own remembered life. Is this then how it all begins? Or is this how it ends? Another poem I wrote a while ago, Passover. We step into the sea of reeds, the stones knuckling our bare feet, seawater brindling our dusty legs, clutching our parcels of food, the babies, a goatskin sack holding the bones of the dead. You reach for my hand, but I'm lofting someone's infant overhead out of the water's treacherous reach. Behind us, across the desert pan, the dusty ruckus of Pharaoh's horses. The ribboning current sluices around my hips, now circling my waist, my skirt ballooning with sea stuff as I lift the infant higher, the water now at my chest. With your free arm, you reach beneath my shoulder, pulling me up toward the high blue sky. None of us knows what's on the other side. We're all at sea here in the beautiful mortal world, not knowing if the waters will part or what's approaching from behind, how long it will take, or what relief may lie ahead. Honestly, how long is this going to take? I'm going to end with two poems that I wrote, again, taking a risk here. I'm ending with two poems that I wrote in the last week, and then one final poem at the end. So two new ones. Anybody else having trouble sleeping? If we were in a big room all together in one room, there would be like a scream coming up from the audience, I'm sure. I know some of you are having trouble sleeping, so this is called The Thread. This is for you. Anybody having trouble sleeping, this is for you. The Thread. I wake each night at 3 or sometimes 4, shadows stitching to the ceiling and the wall, a net to hold my nightmares and my dreams, a hammock for the bodies of the dead. Stilled light tilts from the silent street. I rise and thread from room to room. Outside, the darkened garden sleeps and swoons as if anesthetized. Now that we've finally arrived, it's not the surging firestorm or flood here where catastrophe meets spring. Mute the day, more muted is the night, pierced only by the stars and by the sirens, who. And this poem is from a photograph that has been on my mind that brings us back to the beginning of my portion of the reading, where it's a photo of a dinner party back in the old days when we had dinner parties. If anybody comes up with a better title, let me know. I just wrote it a few days ago, so title suggestions are welcome. Right now it's called February 2017, seen from April 2019. It was Chris's birthday. We were crowded around the table in the new apartment, the one we didn't like and didn't keep for long. The dining room so small we could barely fit 6, but that night we were happy, even though it was 2017, hardly the happiest year in the history of our country. It was Chris's birthday, and everyone had arrived a little late because the A train was running slow and it was snowing. I had roasted a chicken and some of us were drinking wine. We talked about birthdays and how quickly it all slips past, just like our parents warned us. I was wearing a plaid shirt and my triple strand of pearls that I bought at a vintage shop on Broadway and that fooled no one. I'd made a coconut cake, forgetting coconut wasn't Chris's favorite, but no one minded because it was cake and it was Chris's birthday. In the photo, we're forever leaning toward one another, arms wrapping shoulders, the candles guttering down, the table strewn with dishes, the transparent wine glasses glimmering in what's left of the low apricot light. This was all so ordinary, exquisitely ordinary, the way we lived. And I'll end with a poem called Spring. I wrote this last April. You may know that poets are required to write a poem a day for the month of April. It's in our contract, right next to the high pay and the other benefits. So I wrote this last year in April when I was actually able to write a poem a day. Spring. There's still spring. Still slick shoots nosing up through rain-dark soil, preposterous blossoming, yellow blooms swaying on their green stalks, air filling again with birdsong, sweet leaf and moss and peat. Another year, another spring, in the earth's great irresistible swing toward light and life and the ringing crack of the cold world splitting open like an iced Easter egg, like the globe of my heart that April afternoon when I rode my bike down East Allendale Avenue, a girl in jeans and a white peasant blouse. Thank you so much.
Oh, Sarah, woo!
Bravo, Sarah.
Hey.
Oh. Sarah, you're
Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous.
fabulous. Say it. Fabulous, fabulous.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
I couldn't have done it without all of you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much.
I totally see you as that girl in white peasant blouse and jeans, and I think you are still that girl. So,
And you're her friend.
and I'm her friend. Yay. Exquisitely ordinary. I love those two words together.
Me too.
Thank you.
Love that. My teachers have always said, never write poems about your dreams or your nightmares. Nobody cares. But I think that for many of us, the nightmares that we are having when we're actually getting the 5 minutes of sleep that we're getting are beyond the beyond. Drowning kittens, and I think last week a Hasid was strangling me. I don't know. It's just, it would be funny if it weren't so terrifying. Oh, thank you, Sarah. And to Sean Singer, our final reader. So Sean is the author of Discography, which was published by Yale University Press in 2002 and won the Yale Series Younger Poets Prize and the Norma Farber First Book Award from the Poetry Society of America. Sean has also published Honey and Smoke and 2 chapbooks, Passport and Keep Right On Playing Through the Mirror Over the Water. Sean drives a taxi in New York City. So Sean, I wonder what you are doing right now, maybe driving a taxi in your sleep. My dream is to get picked up by Sean and talk poetry as we take the long route. Sean, welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and thanks to the Olive Public Library. So my project is about all of my crazy experiences driving a taxi in the city that I started in 2014, but I stopped March 3rd because of COVID. But it's a book of prose poems, and Tupelo Press is going to publish it at some point. 1/10. Today in the taxi, I brought a man from Midtown to someplace in Astoria near the airport. He asked me to take him round trip. We got to the address and he waited outside the place, and someone came out and handed him a brown paper bag. The man gave the person some cash. Then we left. He asked me to drive him to the E train instead. I don't believe in saints or omens, early winds, or the pink luck of a sunset. I don't see the Lord's love with her incisions and furry ornaments. The vehicle is not just a way to get to the crime, but somehow to bless whatever the journey needs. I use my braking and steering inputs to turn inward or even to go down the uncertain road. Anti-venom. Today in the taxi, I got a fare from Parkchester to the Bronx Zoo. She finally came out of the building, put her baby in the car seat, and said, "I forgot something upstairs." Then she left the baby in the car and went back inside for 7 or 8 minutes. I couldn't believe it. I'm a safe person to leave a baby with, but she didn't know that. I was nervous. Some people live without contradiction. I remained calm, though the situation was beyond the job description. Don Byas had a serpent's tooth affixed to the octave key of his tenor saxophone. Perhaps it helped him push into the wilderness or to ward off evil. One sunny July, Kafka says he wept over the report of the trial of Marie Abraham, who because of poverty and hunger strangled her 9-month-old with a man's tie she used as a garter. B-sharp blues. Today in the taxi, I drove 2 jazz musicians to LaGuardia, the singer and her husband, the pianist. I recognized them right away. We talked about Duke Ellington. We drove by Marcus Garvey Park, and it twinkled like his plume hat and gold epaulets. The pianist lifted his hand like an axle, and the singer skimmed the angles of the road. We moved east. We were people who loved music, who were not bothered as long as we heard its copper ore. Two-way flowing matter through mirrors breathing air. Ellington was a beauty. He fired Mingus by saying, "I must say, I never saw a large man so agile. I never saw anybody make such tremendous leaps. The gambado over the piano carrying your bass was colossal. Imagine being fired by your idol. You might curl into yourself like the ear with its glossy snail and white stirrup, lost in the dark until something familiar beamed back into it." Burnt plastic. Today in the taxi, I picked up a Wall Street type on Park Avenue near 48th Street. He was going to Montclair, New Jersey. His house was on fire, and he spent the trip on the phone, barking orders at his wife, his roofer, his contractor, his insurance company, and at me. He kept saying, "Go this way," or "Which way are you going?" He said to someone that there are firearms and ammunition in the house. Periodically, he held back tears. It was a long 25 miles for me, and I suppose longer for him. We got there, and the house was burning. The Talmud says, "Nature rules over all things except the terror it inspires." Stretching out to the Milky Way. Today in the taxi, I had my 3 maps, my Bialyan apple, a thermos of water. I parked under a bridge and looked at its terminal rivets. The air was like an archive of ammonia and tree resin. At times, the city is glossy with simultaneous alerts. E minor sonata. Today in the taxi driving north on 31st Street in Astoria, a bus went through a red light and nearly killed me and my passenger. Hit with a heavy object, some carry-on with wet fur is misshapen, red, part raccoon, and washed in road light. If ever there was wanting, you have found it. If something was lost, let it be discovered. Dusk's varnish, please swallow the continent whole. Earlier, my passengers were making out like they were the last people on earth. Simone Weil said, attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Uncomfortable. Today in the taxi bringing a guy from the Upper East Side to Penn Station, we were on Park Avenue when he rolled down the window and spit just as a food delivery guy on a bicycle was riding by. The bike messenger looked incredulous. The passenger said, my bad, an expression I loathe. The bike messenger looked like, is this actually happening to me? The guy said, none of it got on you. The bike messenger looked like, what the fuck? The guy said, my bad, I didn't see you. Once an elderly woman remembered Kafka, who had rented a room from her parents in February 1924. The woman, Christine Geyer, said that Kafka, already sick with tuberculosis, was spitting phlegm off the balcony. Didn't he see the children playing below him in the arbor? Tensions. Today in the taxi when a wild HVAC truck cut me off, I thought of Mingus and how he managed his rising anger. Everyone knows he put a shotgun hole in his ceiling when he was being evicted, and that he grabbed a fire axe to kill Juan Teasel, who chased him down with a sharpened Cuban frog sticker. But what about in his private moments when he was asleep or in the shower? What remains is the timber of his base melting in the black firmament of a fluid tunnel, and the black rose looking down on the mass of the earth. City. Tonight in the taxi, I checked the console. I made sure I had plenty of hand sanitizer, tissues, some candy. The traffic invades like a black swarm of spiders' turnings. Everything witnesses everything else. There's 100-fold harvest of faces, each in a window, and each window in a death machine. Empty. Today in the taxi, I got a couple on Lafayette Street going to the Home Depot on West 23rd Street. The woman was about 8 months pregnant. At some point, the man started sobbing. We're in debt every month. We're so close to the edge. I can't do this anymore. The woman said, I'll return it. I had no idea you were this upset. I've never seen you this upset before. The man was hysterically crying and said, we're in debt every month and it doesn't seem to bother you. You don't care. When we were on 6th Avenue, the woman asked me to pull over and they got out. Poor lovers, one volcano pouring lava from one mouth into one's other till one unravels. Floating. Today in the taxi, I brought the famous jazz drummer's wife, Elena, all around Harlem doing errands. Cobb is the last surviving member of the band that recorded Kind of Blue. We went to the bank and to the pharmacy. She let loose with some stories. It was as if his music was not alone from waking up from its dream. I remembered a psychiatrist who said, children wake up in the middle of the night not to see if you're there, but if they're there. I thought of how his wire brushes made this sound like neither fish nor mammal, but this warm ebbing handling a spine. Oren Petals. Today in the taxi, I was at Hart Crane's apartment at 79 Charles Street. I imagined him in his sailor's top and seersucker pants turning the doorknob, eyes glazed with distance. There was this shapeless end of the day orange rushing. Then I had a pause at his apartment house as if we could be wrapped to keep from getting stiff. Crane prepared his writing, but nothing happened. I thought of the Lord having to swab the deck of the Orizaba with a mop, or she was flying over him like silver teeth when he fell off. She can see the current is too strong and the life preserver's too far, but now she is below deck, obviously, and maybe he wants not to swim more than he wants to swim. Music it for yourself. Yesterday in the taxi, I was everywhere, from 127th and St. Nicholas Avenue to 118th and Amsterdam Avenue, then from 106 in Columbus to Canal and Varick, then from Canal and Worcester to Greenwich and Beach, then from Worth and Park Row to South 8th Street in Williamsburg, then from Williamsburg to LGA, then from the Harlem Metro North Station to 118th and Amsterdam again, then Broadway and 107th Street to 40th and Park, then from Grand Central to Grand Street or Christie Street, then from Delancey Street to Kingsland Avenue in Williamsburg, then from Williamsburg to Sunnyside in Queens, then from Sunnyside to Sunnyside, then from 68th and York to 69th and Lex, then from 60th and Madison to 75th and Columbus, then from the Natural History Museum to 37th and 8th, then from 35th and 8th to 72nd and 1st, then from 72nd and York to 86th and Central Park West. I moved the city around the city. I crisscrossed the intersections. I sliced open the cellophane wrapping on a city cigarette box. It's vital to the driver to be alert and calm at the same time. I watched through the window and accelerated up the on-ramps. I put on the hazards. I lifted suitcases. I couldn't even identify some of the languages they spoke. Pink gloves. Tonight in the taxi, I drove 4 women from a bachelorette party, complete with their tiaras and feathers, to another bar. Already happy, they pushed the bride-to-be forward, and she asked me how I thought she looked. I was too taken aback to answer much of anything. She was liquid, prehistoric, and my little body burned. I thought of the Lord throwing handfuls of little sequins at the party, as if to say, there is no other life but this one. Voyagers. Today in the taxi, I was thankful for all the near misses and sudden stops, times I nearly died or almost nearly. I wondered about the raccoon I saw in Central Park North, rooting through a garbage can. Could this have been the Lord wading through the black molasses of night? And how many years will her wandering go on? Purple Death. Tonight in the taxi, I knew the silence in the car with its gray and stain-proof velour that absorbed the silence on the other side of the windshield. The city vibrated and pushed the air up or down as wind among the petals. I thought of insects who might seek yellow pollen to stave off their own destruction. Kafka saw butterflies as great opened-out books of magic. It's possible, but not now, that the Lord will open the door and suck the noise out of the car with her tongue. It's possible for her, but she won't do it now. She'll be happy if one day there were no sounds attached to words and no ears to hear them. Verse. Today in the taxi, I picked up a woman with a little girl, maybe 5 or 6, on West 91st Street going to West 68th Street. When they got in, I said, she should wear a seatbelt, please. And she said, seatbelts aren't safe for kids her age. I'm a safe driver, but in a crash, whatever isn't strapped down will continue flying forward at whatever speed the car was traveling. I imagined fears of the apocalypse, yellow ants, and bacteria coming from the ice caps. All will suffer. Who knows what danger we may have encountered had they worn seatbelts. Once it was claimed that the prophets can command things not in accord with the law. An old rabbi called it a commandment which is fulfilled by means of a transgression. They opened the door and went on their way. Strawberry. Tonight in the taxi, I started on West 120th Street and went to Hoboken, Secaucus, and all over Midtown. The friendliest passengers were two drag queens I picked up after their performance in Astoria, Queens. Their zebra prints and glitter reflected light in the moon's pool. They said they were sisters of the cloth and wanted to make it to television. The night ended with a summons from the police because I made a U-turn on 116th Street. You can't ask of the city more than it can give you. When they left, their feathers flew into the wind and they ran after them. Just read a couple more. Which seed? Today in the taxi, my passenger was crying into her phone. She just had a miscarriage. Who was she talking to? Her mother, perhaps. She hoped there was an invisible hand that had some purpose in her tragedy. I pictured the Lord with her shelf of jars and vapors, her amino acids and carbons, fit together with one black wheel and one white wheel. Every Sabbath, the rabbi would remove the slip of paper with her name on it from the golem's mouth, and it would become lifeless, nothing but a thimbleful of little clay cells. Take hold of it. Tomorrow in the taxi, it will be another day. I'll read the book twice, then lend it out for someone else to read quickly, then I'll read it again. When a prophet asked the Lord about what the book meant, she said, turn it and turn it again, for everything is in it. I pictured the black fire of her ink and the white fire of her parchment, everything far-reaching. Among the blur of noise and chaos from the demonic coming from the city's every window, she commented, be silent, for this is the way I have determined it. Thank you so much.
Wow, Sean.
Wow. That was amazing. Thank you so much.
Sean, I feel, and maybe all of you feel, we have been all over New York City in a very brief period of time. I've crossed every borough and hit every part of the city. It's just, wow. I feel like I was sitting up front with you, witnessing what was happening. I love commandment fulfilled by means of a transgression. I love that as a kind of Talmudic prophetic comment, and hope that all of my transgressions are commandments fulfilled. And the image of that lunatic Wall Street guy screaming about the fire at his house while you drove him, as he somehow maintained his character of barking orders to everyone. It's going to be an amazing book, and I hope you'll figure out a way to let us all know when it comes out.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sean. What a gift. A gift from David, from Sarah, from Sean, made possible by Chrissy and Shay and Suanne. Thank you, everyone who came today and spent this beautiful, necessary hour with us. Maybe we could give a woo to everyone. Woo! Woo! Woo!
Hey! Awesome.
Hey. Thank you all.
So great.
Really nice to see all of you, Michael and my brother, and oh my God, I hate to say goodbye. And you'll all put your masks back on.
Thank you, Jen.
Suzanne, I love you. Mwah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good weekend.
All right, everyone. Take good care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye, Haran.
Thank you, Sarah.
Bye, Alexandra. Bye, Robin. Bye, Jan.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, brother Michael.
Bye, Mario. Bye, Annie.
Love you
Bye,
guys.
Phyllis.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Daniel. Bye, Rufus and Max.
Bye, Sarah.
Bye,
Thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you for
Bye,
inviting me.
everyone. Thank you.
Bye, David.